Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Shaun Stevenson Books. I'm Shaun Stevenson, author of the Throne series, and my brother and I have a running joke about Goosebumps and any of these spooky kind of stories because I believe it was in the first Goosebumps episode, Dead House, of the TV show, where they say something like, "We want you to live here forever." So now we always joke about that wherever we read a spooky book, but today's spooky book, they want people to stay fresh forever. What book am I talking about? I am talking about none other than EERIE, Indiana, Return to Foreverware. So this one is by Mike Ford. It's the first book in the EERIE, Indiana series. It was a special 99-cent introductory price. So book number one, it has this like classic sort of green and pink colors on the book, and it has the ripped, torn edge opening, which I love this. It says, "There's a well-kept secret on this street, and they're going to keep it forever." I couldn't resist. I loved it. Okay, so EERIE, Indiana. Let's talk about it. This was a show that only had one season back in the day, like in the 90s. It was on Fox Kids, I think it was, and I really enjoyed that show. I'm pretty sure I've seen every episode of it. My brother and I used to watch it all the time. We loved EERIE, Indiana. We were like, let's go to EERIE, Indiana and see all the weird stuff. We really wanted to go. But obviously, EERIE, Indiana, as is portrayed in this book, is not a real place. Now, my biggest question about this series was, are these books going to be like novelizations of TV episodes, or are they going to be different stories that stand alone? And I actually really was kind of concerned they would just be retellings of episodes, because sometimes, here's the deal, that series on television came first. Goosebumps came first, the books, before the TV series. So the episodes that are based off books, I don't mind watching, and I don't mind reading the books, even though I've seen almost all the Goosebumps episodes, because the books were first. So there's more effort was probably put into those books than the TV episodes necessarily, as far as story-wise goes. So for EERIE, Indiana, though, I was concerned that this would be more the case where it's a novelization, which novelizations of movies and TV shows are sometimes not very good because they're kind of a cash grab put out to like build on the success of the movie or the TV show. So it's always a big question, will it be good or will it not be good? And so that was my biggest concern coming into EERIE, Indiana. And even with the title of the first book, Return to Foreverware, I was like, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure Foreverware is an episode of EERIE, Indiana. But then I was thinking, well, it says Return to Foreverware. So will this be the episode or will it be something different? It's something different. I'm here to tell you these stories are different so far, from what I can tell, from episodes of the TV show, which I was really glad about, because I just didn't want that rehash of the episodes for these books. I wanted new stories from the world of EERIE, Indiana, and that is what we got. So the basic premise of EERIE, Indiana are there are these two kids, Marshall and Simon, and they seem to be the only ones aware that weird, eerie stuff happens in EERIE, Indiana. And so they have been cataloging all of these things. They have this like secret spot in Marshall's attic where they post all their news clippings of weird stuff and evidence that they've collected from strange things that have happened around town. And it's pretty much like all the cryptid stories you can think of, including things like Elvis Presley being alive and just anything odd and weird like that. That's what's in this series. So there's like everything from Bermuda Triangle stuff to cryptids to werewolves to aliens, like all the things. So Marshall and Simon in this book have been told by their fathers that they need to get jobs. So they decide, well, let's get jobs together. Let's go together and try and get a job. They find a listing for an odd job. Not jobs, and not for odd jobs, but an odd job. So when they go to the house where this odd job is for, they notice that everything seems like it is stuck in the 1960s or 70s. And they're wondering what is going on here. And there is a definite mystery. There's some real eerie, creepy stuff happening. And as things unfold, they discover that there is much more than meets the eye to this family and this house. This couple, Mr. and Mrs. Stewart, what secret are they hiding? Because they want to keep it forever. What is the secret? You have to read to find out, because this is a spoiler-free review. Now, I gotta say, building on characters from a TV show is sometimes kind of an interesting thing, because there is a difficulty sometimes in capturing the essence of the actor's portrayal of that character, of capturing the dialogue of that character, all those sorts of things. But I do feel like Mike Ford manages to really capture Marshall's like dry kind of wit and cleverness. One of the things that's interesting here is Marshall is investigating what's going on, and he's not dumb. Sometimes some characters are just real dumb when they ask people questions about things they're investigating, like they push too far. Like I will say, for instance, Alex Rider, whenever he's investigating something, always asks really dumb questions of the villains. And you're sitting there thinking, why did you just ask that? Now you've tipped your hand that you know something. You're kind of like pushing them into a corner, and people that are pushed into a corner don't like being pushed into a corner. So they're going to push back. But Marshall is really good at just asking these very innocent sounding questions and playing up the fact that he's a kid and kind of feeling a little bit like naive, I guess he kind of plays off, but he's not. He's asking really smart questions to help him get to the root of what's going on. So Marshall and Simon are investigating, and things just get out of control as usual in EERIE, Indiana, because something weird is going on. I also do think the interesting thing to me is the title of this book gives away a ton if you know the episode it's based on. I won't say anything about that, because if you haven't seen the episode, you will not know what's going on. I also do think if you haven't seen an episode, I think it's worthwhile to watch one so you kind of have a feel for how this series goes before reading this book or this series, because I think that it does kind of rely on you to know some things from the show. It did do a good job of reminding you of things. So like, for instance, this book had a sort of mini synopsis halfway through of the Foreverware episode that this book is kind of a sequel to. So I thought that was super helpful because it jogged my memory, and I thought, oh yeah, those were all the plot points of that episode. I remember. So I thought that was really, really helpful. I think just having that basic knowledge of at least one episode will help you a ton going into this book. This book is different from a Goosebumps or a Shivers or even a Spine Chillers or any of those, because these books are not trying to be scary, like outright jump scares or spooky. They are more just, they're sort of like a Twilight Zone feel, if that makes sense. That's the best comparison I can come up with. Kind of like weird stories that are a little bit odd, a little bit out there, a little more sci-fi than fantasy. Like I would say Goosebumps usually goes the more fantasy route, and EERIE, Indiana goes a little more the sci-fi route. So I will say these books use a little more technology than fantasy to tell their weird stories, if that makes sense. So these books are not creepy. I will say, though, this book was intense and definitely has some moments of, oh, this is really, really tricky. How are they going to get out of this? What are they going to do? The other thing these books have is like a dry humor. So, for instance, the house that they're working at, the family members are Mr. and Mrs. Stewart. And you come to find out later on that Mrs. Stewart's first name is Martha. So her name is Martha Stewart. And then later on you find out another family relative is named Rod, as in Rod Stewart. So you have some like jokes and humor that's real dry like that are in these books that are not always in Goosebumps either. So they really do stand alone a little more as their own thing. Like I said, Twilight Zone is the best kind of comparison, like a quirky Twilight Zone that's a little bit of a dry humor. That's what these books are like. If you're into Goosebumps, any of those sorts of stories, and you don't mind a little more of a technology-based spooky story that's not exactly spooky, but just more like eerie. Eerie is the best word for it. Then this would be a great series for you to check out for sure. So how many stars would I give Return to Foreverware? I think at the end of the day, I prefer the fantasy a little more than the technology creepiness. I think that is, to me, what's a little more appealing, but I really love fantasy books. So I think for me, this book was a 3 out of 5 stars. It was good. I definitely enjoyed reading it. I didn't stop reading it. I read it all the way through. So I definitely think it was a good book, but it just, for me, didn't click as much. So I would say 3 out of 5 stars for Return to Foreverware. So, have you ever read any of these books, EERIE, Indiana? Let me know in the comments below. Have you seen the show? Do you remember it at all from back in the day? Or have you discovered it nowadays? I don't know where it's playing, but I think it is. The DVDs are out there somewhere for the season, as well as it's got to be on streaming someplace. So, definitely check it out if you're into these kinds of Twilight Zone-y stories that have a really quirky sense of humor. This is the book for you. Until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye!